Kia ora tātou. E te wana ki te mihi ki a tātou kua huia nei e te kaupapa. Nō reira e te kai karakia, e aku kaia ko, e nā hua mahi, tēnā tātou katoa. No Ingarangi, no Koterana Aho, no Gofau te Monga, no Firth o Clyde te Awa, ko Kilman o te Iwi, ko Ayrshire te Hapu, ko New Zealand te Waka. Engari, I whānau mai au ki Tamaki Makaurau, kei te whau taku kāinga ko te heringa waka o Orewa te Marae. He kairomiromi, he kairangahau taku mahi, he whaikaha aho, he raru a-io aho. Ko Allan taku whānau, ko Rachel taku ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Greetings to you all once, twice, and three times. My name is Rachel Allan. I'm a physiotherapist and researcher, and it gives me great pleasure to present my master's thesis findings to you today. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge those who contributed to this work, in particular Miriam Rodriguez, who is from the Neurogenetic Registry, who helped with recruitment, Denise Scanley from the Muscular Dystrophy Association, and my AUT supervisors, Kate Waterworth, Joe Fidel, and Gareth Terry. I also want to acknowledge the participants of this research, without whose contribution I would not be standing here today. Today's presentation is called Conceptualizations of Movement and Movement Loss in New Zealand Adults Living with Spinal Muscular Atrophy in New Zealand. And I guess to also talk a little bit about my own coming towards this project. I also live with this condition, so that just gives you a bit of background with that. So I wanted to start off with providing a brief overview of what spinal muscular atrophy is, for those who are unfamiliar with the condition. So SMA is a rare neurogenetic condition which causes muscle weakness, and it's medically classified as a chronic progressive disease. It's more well known as a pediatric condition, but it actually impacts individuals across the lifespan. In New Zealand, the SMA population sits at around 70 to 80 individuals, and around 40 of those are adults living in the community. SMA is caused by a homozygous deletion of the SMN1 gene on chromosome 5q13. So usually, point over there. Usually you can see in healthy individuals, you have two genes that code for a protein, which is called survival motor neuron protein. And this protein allows your motor neurons to be sustained throughout your lifetime. And approximately one in every 40 to 60 people, they have a deletion of the SMN1 gene, but because they still have a remaining SMN1 gene there, they're able to compensate. And so these individuals present normally. And then approximately 1 in 10,000 babies are born with SMA, where there's a double deletion there. In terms of the presentation of SMA in the body, the anterior horn cells in the spinal cord are highly susceptible to the loss of SMN protein. And so when these neurons can't function adequately, it means that the nerve signal from the brain can't get to the muscle, and so the muscle's waste. And then the presentation of weakness in the body tends to be like kind of proximal muscles and the spinal muscles rather than the distal muscles themselves. There are 4 different types of SMA. So type 1 and type 2 are the more severe forms of the condition, and those affect children before they can sit or before they can walk. And without treatment, these types of SMA are usually fatal before the age of 5. The less severe forms of the condition, types 3 and types 4, affect children after they've learned to walk or after or in adulthood. Yeah. And in terms of looking at individuals in the community who live with SMA, there's a wide range of physical impairments that people might be struggling with. So that might affect people's ability to walk, their upper limb function, their respiratory function. It's quite common for children to develop scoliosis as they grow, so they might also have issues to do with that. So for a long time, there was nothing that could be done about the SMA diagnosis. It was just manage as you can. But in 2016, we saw the introduction of the very first disease-modifying drug, which is approved over in the States, Spinal, and in 2022, these drugs were approved by Pharmac for use in New Zealand for children under the age of 18 living with SMA. And obviously, this has dramatically changed the outlook for individuals with the condition, particularly young children and families living with the condition. There are, however, ongoing challenges for the SMA community in Aotearoa. And these include ongoing lack of equity and access for New Zealand adults to having disease-modifying drugs. Alongside this, there's an insufficient amount of funding or support being supplied to allow individuals to self-manage and prevent the progression of the disease. This is also a challenge for people. There's insufficient acknowledgement or awareness of the impact of social barriers on those living with the condition. And I think this is kind of highlighted by the fact that internationally there are, like, statistics show that individuals living with SMA have reduced psychosocial well-being with the condition. And so for me, this all these factors kind of led me to question, is there something that we're missing in terms of our approach? The current approach tends to be quite biomedical focused, but there's so many things that are like in the community that could possibly make a difference. Is there anything else that we could or should be doing to improve quality of life for people living with the condition? So the concept of movement and rehabilitation is quite central. And in biomedicine, we understand movement in particular ways. So that might be in terms of the way that we objectify the body, the way that the body is reduced to its different components. Different kinds of movement are valued over others. So, for example, exercise as a physio is really important versus leisure activities may be less important. And in terms of SMA, movement is really important in establishing diagnosis and like understanding the progression of the disease as well. So, very important. Social constructivists argue that there's a need to understand concepts like movement and movement loss and how they operate in society. And this is because within social constructivism, these concepts aren't just passive reflections of reality, they actually create and generate our reality by shaping the ways that we think, act, and experience the world and how we see that we're kind of moving forward. So I had two research questions. The first research question was, in what ways do New Zealand adults living with SMA understand and think about movement and movement loss? And the second research question was, in what ways are these understandings impacted by interactions in healthcare and broader society? It was a critical qualitative study. It uses social constructivist epistemology, informed by critical rehabilitation and critical disability scholarship. I did 10 interviews with adults living with SMA, and these interviews were 60 to 90 minutes long. And then I analysed the transcripts using Brown and Clark's 6 steps of reflexive thematic analysis. And there's a little diagram there, that flow process. And this is a picture of my house. So I was busy coding and sorting last year. So to answer research question 1, I developed a conceptual model of movement and movement loss that was defined by the participants in the research. And there were three main themes that came forward for me when I was analysing. And these themes were movement matters, movement is being, doing and connecting, and movement is transformation. And this is just like another representation of it. So just go into each of those themes now. So theme 1, movement matters, describes the idea that movement is important and valued for people living with SMA. And this is kind of in spite of the fact that many participants expressed the fact that they felt that others didn't see the importance of movement to them. Movement was considered important because it was considered central to whole body well-being, and it supported meaningful participation in society. It enabled people to do the things that they wanted to do and to be the person that they wanted to be, both for themselves and for others. I think more broadly, movement provided the opportunity to experience dignity, independence, autonomy, and self-determination. And those things were really highly valued by the participants. And correspondingly, when individuals talked about movement loss, it was significant because it took away those things, their perceived ability to experience dignity, independence, autonomy, self-determination. Those same things were things that they didn't want to lose. These are a couple of quotes from participants in the study. Participant B, movement means that I can do at least some things independently. I'm in a better state of mind when I'm able to move my arms, brush my hair, brush my teeth without getting exhausted. And so it's kind of like just the daily grind that those kind of things that we would normally just brush over become really important for people who have SMA. And then participant A, movement is really important to me. Like, I want to keep doing what I'm doing. I want to have as much freedom to be in control. I know I'm lucky at this point. I'm not handcuffed, but I know that if I lose that movement, I get more and more change because you're restricted. There's all sorts of things that you can't do. And so, you know, the stakes are high for people. Theme 2, movement is being, doing and connecting, describes that the way that movement is grounded in people's physical interactions with the world and others. It's the ability to experience and do and fully engage one's body and senses with their environment. And, you know, like, one of the questions I asked people was like, what are the things that you really enjoy doing? And some people like had to try quite hard to think of things, but everybody had something that they really loved to do that was like, you know, regardless of the amount of impairment that they had. Yes. So movement is a physical experience, but paradoxically, movement can also transcend beyond this. And by this, I mean the fact that as people became kind of more had experienced more physical impairment, their movement kind of expanded into the social environment or into the use of technologies. And I think Dave Nichols' concept of connectivity model is quite a nice, it speaks to that quite well. So supportive relationships with people and technologies were central to maintaining movement within a context of physical limitation. And many individuals actually intentionally cultivated these relationships so that they could access movement opportunities despite their physical limitation. When individuals experience movement and movement loss, they often experienced, you know, disconnection and a sense of disconnection from their bodies, but also from a sense of social isolation as well. And so I think it's also, you know, you get the flip side of like movement as being doing connecting, but also that sense of socialization, social isolation when movement is lost. Finally, theme 3, movement is transformation. So this refers to the idea that movement can change and transform us. Movement and movement loss aren't necessarily good or bad. And I think the interesting thing was that for many of the participants in the study, movement loss was also an opportunity for growth. So they had to explore new ways of doing things. They had to, you know, meet new people, try new things in order to be able to sustain what they were able to do and sustain their independence. And through this, I think there's a real need to embrace the paradox. Living with SMA involves grappling with uncertainty and challenges presented with movement loss. But it is also possible to adapt, live, grow, and build new identities and ways of being in the world despite this. And this is a really beautiful quote. Having a good mindset and being able to accept that having to adapt continuously is something that's helped my health. Like, I'll just have to learn that everything I'll have to adapt to. Coming to terms with that has helped me a lot. So in the second part of the research question, I also looked at the social influences on the construction of movement, in particular the biomedical discourse and discourses within broader society. Sorry. Okay, there was a really clear sense from the interviews that participants' understanding of movement and movement loss had been informed by their healthcare interactions. And I don't think this can really be understated. This is really strong. I don't really want to go into too much depth, so I'm just kind of gliding over. But like the language and the understanding that people had of their bodies mirrored what they had been told by their health professionals, or what they had read themselves about the condition. They often use medical jargon to describe their experience, or when they were communicating to me about their condition, they would use things like particular markers around like the severity of the experience and things like that. So it was really strong coming through. I also asked people about their experiences accessing and navigating healthcare, and it was very clear that participants had experienced a massive amount of barriers in terms of accessing just basic access to clinicians who understood about their condition, being able to get the medications that they needed to manage their pain and all sorts of things, being able to access wheelchairs that were adequate and working. Healthcare relationships were really key. Having clinicians who understood their condition but also weren't kind of put off by the fact that it was a progressive condition was a massive challenge across the board. And many of the participants, they would go into their healthcare interactions and they'd actually try and guide them in a way that meant that they were more likely to get what they needed from them. So loads more that I could talk about on this, but I think just acknowledging that there were many barriers that individuals were facing, and that there's definitely scope for improvement in health relationships and access. I think it probably covers it. Okay. I mean, similarly, in terms of broader social discourses on participants' understanding of movement, again, experiences of physical accessibility. Many of the individuals were wheelchair users, and so that was a big thing for them. but alongside that, experiences of social inclusion or exclusion, you know, particularly in places and spaces like schools, you know, universities, hospitality, being able to go out and go to concerts and things like that. These were things that participants would have really wanted to enjoy, but because of the social barriers that were there, it really kind of limited them in what they could do. And I think this really set up individuals to have a sense of that their movement was less valuable than able-bodied movement. So that kind of feeds into this, you know, the ableist values. And also alongside this, that generally within, you know, our culture of really valuing individualism over collectivism, that limited people's ability to kind of navigate other ways of being, particularly for individuals who were, say, more highly functioning. So like many of the individuals who were wheelchair users, they were kind of like, oh yeah, I need help to do various things and I'm okay with that. But individuals who were on that cusp of, like, you know, walkers, but then perhaps needing a bit more help, found it very difficult to navigate that. The idea that they couldn't do everything themselves. Yeah. I think it's really important to acknowledge the fact that you know, social discourses and health discourses, that those challenges didn't go unnoticed by the participants in the study, nor did they go unchallenged. And by what I mean by this is that most, if not all, participants were engaged in some kind of social activism within their communities to fight back against the barriers that they were experiencing and to support others who were going through similar things. And alongside this, they also made really deliberate choices in the way that they lived their lives, which preserved their autonomy, their sense of safety and their sense of control with what they could do. One of the defining features of being able to successfully withstand the negative social pressures that people experienced was the ability to draw upon a community who was your community. And in my thesis, I called this the inclusive allied community. And this is made up of people who truly support the person living with SMA. They might be friends, family, whānau, support workers, even healthcare professionals, if they were your healthcare professional, you know, the one who's got your back. And all of these people kind of help to support that person in what they want to do and as they navigate forward in their lives. And I've been kind of thinking about ways to represent this since writing my thesis, and I think the closest representation that I can kind of come up with is this idea of the marae. And I've got Mason Jury's Te Pare Tapa Whā model out here. But if you have a look, it's like some really nice crossover of the dimensions that were identified in my model, plus and how they map onto Mason Jury's model. So in Jury's model, it's argued that when one of the walls of the whare is impacted, it impacts all of them. It impacts the strength of the whole whare. And so we can kind of see when someone's tinana, their body, is impacted, like a condition like SMA, that it might impact the other walls. And correspondingly, there's a really strong allure to try and like patch up what's happening at the body level of the body to try and address, you know, the other walls as well to support well-being. However, like, I think the really prominent thing about this model is that no one wall is more prominent or more important than the other. And so, what might happen, what could happen if we saw, taha whānau, or like the social aspects of experience as being equally as important as someone's body experience. And if we were able to kind of put resources to supporting communities that support individuals living with conditions like SMA, what opportunities might that open up? Yeah. I wanted to finish with just some final quotes from participants. This was a really striking one that stayed with me. Participant H was talking about what they had really hoped they'd been told when they were diagnosed. I wish someone had told me things are going to look very different, and that's going to be okay. It's going to look different, but you're going to grow and learn and change with it, and there will be a place in society for you. We just have to help you find that. And again, just coming back to, what really matters. I know it sounds cliche, but I count my blessings. I've lost so many good friends to SMA, and I'm still here. That awareness keeps me going. I'm grateful to be able to do what I can do. I'm thankful my crooked body at the end of the day is just superficial. And my friends who passed away, they'd easily trade places with me. Having that awareness helps me get through every day. Thanks for listening.